2 games, 2 results, one afternoon that reminded everyone watching exactly why football at this level refuses to be ignored. Oldham Athletic drew 1 apiece with Notts County, and Doncaster Rovers edged out Port Vale by 2-1. But the scorelines alone tell you almost nothing. What happened in between them is where the real story lives. Oldham Athletic 1-1 Notts County pre-match. What is it about Boundary Park that makes visiting sides feel uneasy before a ball has even been kicked? There is something in the air up there, something that cannot be measured or quantified, yet every away manager who has ever walked into that ground has felt it pressing against them. The crowd files in and you begin to wonder, do they know something the rest of us don't? Notts County arrive carrying a secret weapon that most people have conveniently forgotten about. They are, by documented fact, the oldest professional football club on the planet. Does that history weigh on them, or does it quietly fuel them in moments when everything feels uncertain? That is a question nobody can answer until the pressure actually arrives. Both managers have spent an entire week preparing for exactly this moment, but here is what nobody ever talks about: how much of a tactical plan actually survives first contact with a hostile crowd. The noise at Boundary Park builds before kickoff and you find yourself genuinely wondering whether the visiting dressing room can hear themselves think. The pitch looks heavy, both sets of supporters have noticed it. Has either manager factored that into their selection, or will it only become a factor when legs start to tire in the final 20 minutes? These are the details that separate good management from great management, and today might just expose the difference. First half, the referee blows his whistle and immediately something feels off about the tempo, not in a bad way, but in a way that makes you lean forward slightly and ask yourself what both teams are actually waiting for. There is a patience here that feels deliberate, almost conspiratorial, as though both sides know something the crowd does not yet. Oldham set up in a mid-block, and the interesting thing is how committed they are to holding that shape even when County begin to find pockets of space between the lines. How long can a team sit back before the pressure becomes too much to contain? That is the central question of the first 15 minutes, and the answer is not yet clear. County are recycling possession with a calmness that should not be possible away from home at a ground this intimidating. Where does that composure come from? Is it genuine belief, or is it the kind of brittle confidence that shatters the moment something goes wrong? The crowd senses the question and begins to turn up the volume. Then, without warning, the visiting side does something that changes the entire texture of the afternoon. A quick combination in central midfield pulls 2 Oldham players out of their positions simultaneously, and for a fraction of a second, a lane opens up that had no business opening up. The ball travels forward, the striker spins sharply, and the finish is low, clean, and utterly convincing. 1-0 to the visitors. Now, how will Oldham respond to that? The answer arrives faster than expected. Something shifts inside the home side the moment that goal goes in. It is almost as though the concession unlocks a stubbornness that had been dormant. They press higher, they engage earlier, and suddenly the question is no longer whether Oldham can cope, but whether County can cope with the storm they have just accidentally invited. Who exactly has woken up who here? Chances begin to come and go at both ends, and each near miss raises a new question. Why is the goalkeeper at full stretch when the ball should be comfortable to hold? Why is that cross finding a teammate when it looked overhit from the moment it left the boot? The first half ends at 1-0, but the feeling in the ground is that this result is absolutely nowhere near settled. Second half, something significant happens between the two halves that nobody outside of those 2 dressing rooms will ever fully know about. Because when Oldham re-emerge, they are a completely different proposition. What was said in that tunnel? What adjustment was made? What emotion was channeled? What instruction was delivered that turned a passive first half performance into something altogether more urgent and dangerous? County are now sitting deeper, and that in itself is a fascinating development. When a team that came here with the lead voluntarily surrenders territory, what are they actually conceding beyond the physical space? Confidence? Momentum? The crowd certainly interprets it as weakness, and their belief grows accordingly. Oldham's attacks have a relentlessness now that makes you wonder how County's defensive organisation can possibly hold. Every set piece feels like it carries genuine threat. Every long ball into the box asks a question that the visiting defence has to answer correctly every single time. But how many times in a row can any defence get that right before the laws of probability take over? The equaliser, when it arrives, is almost inevitable and yet somehow still shocking. A corner swings in from the left side, the penalty area becomes a scramble of bodies and missed clearances, and when the ball drops to the edge of the box, the shot that follows is struck with the kind of conviction that only comes from a player who absolutely believes it is going in. It deflects, it bobbles, and it crosses the line. Why does fortune so consistently find the players who commit most fully to the moment? Boundary Park shakes. And now, with the scores level, the most intriguing question of the match presents itself: which team wants the winner more? County have gone from leading to drawing. Does that feel like a failure to them, or a near escape? Oldham have gone from losing to drawing. Does that feel like progress, or does it taste of a victory that slipped away? Both teams push for a winner in the final stages. Both teams find that the other simply will not yield. The referee's final whistle arrives, and the honest answer is that 1-1 is the only fair outcome. But fair outcomes in football always leave you wondering what might have been different with just one more minute on the clock. Doncaster Rovers 2-1 Port Vale pre-match. Doncaster Rovers vs Port Vale carries a specific kind of tension that only followers of this division truly understand. These are not games played for glamour. They are played for survival, for momentum, for the kind of 3 points that quietly reshape a season in ways that only become clear months later. So here is the first question of the afternoon: which of these two sides actually understands what is at stake today? Port Vale travel with a point to prove, and that is always a dangerous thing to give an opponent. A team with something to prove is unpredictable in ways that a settled, confident side is not. Has Doncaster accounted for that edge in their preparation, or will it surprise them the way it surprises so many others? The EcoPower Stadium has its own personality on matchday, a personality that rewards directness and punishes hesitation. Both managers know this ground well enough to respect it, but knowing a ground and actually using it to your advantage are two entirely different things, and the gap between those two things is where football matches are won and lost. First half Doncaster begin with an intensity that raises an immediate question: is this genuine confidence or nervous energy wearing confidence as a disguise? The two can look identical in the early stages of a game, but they feel very different to the players experiencing them, and only time will reveal which one this actually is. Port Vale settle into a shape that is harder to break down than it looks on paper. They are compact, they are organized, and they seem entirely comfortable allowing Doncaster to have the ball in areas where it causes no real damage. Is this discipline, or is it simply an absence of ambition? The answer matters enormously for how the rest of this game unfolds. The first goal arrives and it settles absolutely nothing, which is itself a remarkable thing. Doncaster work a move down the right side with a fluency that suggests this has been rehearsed many times this week on the training ground. The ball arrives into the penalty area at exactly the right moment, and the finish is clinical enough to make you wonder why every goal cannot look this straightforward. 1-0 to the home side, but does Port Vale look like a team that is beaten? Not remotely. Vale respond with a persistence that begins to make Doncaster uncomfortable. Why is the home side suddenly giving up possession so carelessly? Why are the second balls, which they were winning convincingly 20 minutes ago, now going to the visitor every single time? The momentum of a football match is one of the most mysterious forces in sport. Nobody sees it shift until it has already shifted completely. The equalizer is coming before it actually arrives, and that sense of inevitability is what makes it so deflating for the home support. Port Vale work it well across the face of the box, and the finish is cool, considered, and devastatingly well placed. 1-1. Now Doncaster face the test that separates average sides from resilient ones. Can they absorb the blow and respond, or does the concession linger in their legs and their minds all the way to half-time? The second half begins and there is a feeling in the ground that this is going to be decided by small margins. Which team executes their moment cleanly when it arrives? Which goalkeeper makes the save that changes the energy of the entire game? Which manager makes the substitution that unlocks something the opposition never saw coming? These are the questions that hover over every minute of this second period. Doncaster are the first to find an answer. They win a free kick in a position that looks dangerous but not obviously decisive, and here is where football reveals its absolute refusal to follow logic. The ball is delivered with a quality that is frankly unexpected from 25 yards. The wall does precisely the wrong thing at the worst possible moment, and the goalkeeper is beaten. 2-1. How does a free kick that 90% of the crowd expected to sail harmlessly over the bar end up in the back of the net? Port Vale do not collapse, which is itself a story worth telling. They press for an equalizer with a determination that demands respect, and several times in the final 20 minutes they come close enough to make Doncaster visibly anxious. Why does a lead always feel more fragile to the team holding it than it looks from the outside? That psychological paradox plays out in real time for the home faithful, who find the final stages almost unbearable to watch. A last-minute effort from Port Vale strikes the woodwork and the sound of ball hitting post is one of the most haunting sounds in football. So close. And yet, what does close actually mean in a sport where there is no partial credit? The ball comes back out. Doncaster survive. The whistle blows. 2-1. 3 points for the home side. But the most fascinating detail of the entire afternoon is this: Port Vale played well enough to deserve more, and Doncaster won despite that fact. Which of those two realities is more important when you are looking at the table on a Sunday morning and asking yourself what kind of team you actually are? Two games, two completely different stories wearing the same scoreline logic. Oldham and County proved that a draw can feel like a victory to one side and a defeat to the other simultaneously. Doncaster proved that winning ugly is still winning. And Port Vale proved that football is a sport entirely capable of breaking your heart while simultaneously reminding you exactly why you keep coming back. Is there any other sport in the world that does all of that in a single Saturday afternoon? The answer, of course, is no.